Tēnā koe e te whare, ho maukatere te maunga, ko hurunui te awa, ko te whānau Kepes toko iwi, no hane kare o ko tupuna, no waipara ahau, ko Ben Kepes toko ingoa, no reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Greetings everyone, and thanks for being here, and I am cognizant that I am all that stands between you and a drink, so I'll try and hurry up. And so I just gave you, I guess, my affiliations in Te Reo, but there's an affiliation that a lot of people in the room will maybe connect me with, and that I can probably describe a little bit more pictorially, which is that, I'm kind of known as a shit stirrer. In my defence, I don't try and be a shit stirrer. I would like to say that I'm constructively critical and then I maybe play devil's advocate. But what I'd like to do today, I'm not going to negate anything that anyone said, but maybe leave us thinking about how we can take the amazing learnings and the amazing talks that we've had today, but contextualise them for who we are, what we are, and fundamentally what we can be and what we want to be. And so New Zealand is a tech centre, isn't it awesome? And so, you know, for the past 10 years, and largely off the back of Xero, not to dismiss anything that went before, but largely off the back of Xero, we've got this perception that we are this tech hub. And so when that happened, some fat cat politicians who probably failed every economics course that they ever went to, decided that we needed to emulate someone. We couldn't just be what we are, we had to be something else. And therefore we had to be the biggest one, we had to emulate the biggest one of them all, which is of course Silicon Valley. Indeed, at the High Tech Awards this year, all the attendees were told that that's it, New Zealand has arrived. We're now the Silicon Valley of the South Pacific. You know, when I heard that, my response was, well, I don't actually know what the hell that means. I spend a bunch of time up in Silicon Valley. I'm kind of up there all the time. And so over the past few months since I heard that, I've sort of been watching and thinking about Silicon Valley and trying to kind of ruminate over what it means that we are now the next Silicon Valley. Did that person mean that we spend 3 or 4 hours a day commuting the 40 or 50 miles between San Francisco and the valley itself, stuck in our cars, or alternatively in buses from the internet companies that got protested for an hour before they left? Is that what that person meant? Or maybe that person meant that there was a housing crisis, and don't get me wrong, I know we have a housing crisis here in New Zealand, but believe me, Silicon Valley has it worse. Or maybe they were referring to kind of an ethos that you work much like this ant, continuously pushing boulders uphill. You have to work your 60, 80, 100 hours a week. If you're lucky, you might be able to take 2 weeks vacation a year, but you will take your phone with you and answer your emails because you have to do that to survive. Your businesses need you to do that to survive. Because the reality is that Silicon Valley is a zero-sum game. Everyone knows that of 100 companies that start up, one will go on to succeed. And that's the way the system, the venture capital system, the investment system, the M&A system is predicated. In order for the one to win, 99% of the 99 need to lose, which is a little bit grotesque in my view. And I guess if we're looking for the epitome of what is wrong with Silicon Valley, this would be it. So this is the Juicero, and fact checkers in the audience will correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure the company raised about $100 million. And what they created was this amazingly engineered machine, which was to do one thing. It was to squeeze these packets of juice. And the packets of juice were a proprietary packet, a pre-packaged packet of juice. Bloomberg did some testing and realized that, so this device was $700 US when it was first released, by the way. So Bloomberg did some testing and realized that you could buy a 1-gallon bottle of juice from Walmart quite easily without buying these pre-packaged proprietary sachets. But even if you did buy those sachets, you could actually squeeze them with your hand and get them into the glass anyway. Needless to say, this company failed, but it did so after raising, as I say, a lot of money and selling a lot of units. Because basically the way Silicon Valley works, and it is a bit of a generalization, is to basically do the things for 20-year-old white dudes that their mothers don't do for them anymore because they don't live at home. And that is the model that Silicon Valley is predicated on, to an extent. And so we didn't get that right, and therefore a few stuffed shirt corporate types in New Zealand decided, right, we can't be Silicon Valley, or we don't want to be Silicon Valley, or whatever, we're going to be Israel. There you go, there's the big tech centre that we want to emulate, we're going to be the next Israel. At the risk of sounding like a smartass, which I have a tendency to do, I apologise. I have actually lived in Israel, all my family's in Israel, and I have an incredible sense of connection with Israel, but it's a country that frustrates me endlessly. I spend a lot of time there. We go back every year or two, and every time I go there, I feel really at home, but incredibly angry. And why do I feel angry? Well, there's a lot of reasons, but let's look at what it means to be a tech ecosystem in Israel, what it means to be in Israel. Well, the first thing, as I'm sure everyone in the room knows, is that Israel is literally at war with a large number of its neighbours, and has been for the 69 years since the 14th of May 1948, when the Declaration of Independence was signed by David Ben-Gurion, or announced by David Ben-Gurion. So what does that mean? It means it's exciting, and there's jet planes, and there's all that good stuff. What it also means is that every young man and young woman at the age of 18 has to enter the army. And whereas in New Zealand you can enter the army because you like being physical, you like getting outside a bit, you want to do some peacekeeping missions or maybe some disaster response missions, what do we ask, or what does Israel ask these young people to do? It asks them to go and, without being political, brutalise Palestinian kids who are throwing stones at them. I understand the Palestinian problem. I'm not going to get into a debate about what side is right or wrong. But regardless of that, imagine what it does to a population when its best and brightest young people have to go and do that stuff. What it does is it creates a society that is perennially at war. And it's not just Israel versus the Arab nations that are at war. It's Jew versus Muslim. It's Ashkenazi versus Sephardi. It's recent immigrant versus previous immigrant. There's a word in Hebrew which sort of roughly translates as sort of chaos squared. The word is balagan. And basically life in Israel is balagan. It's tense, it's intense, it's stressful. It's really, frankly, it's unpleasant. It's an incredible place, it's amazing history, it's beautiful, it's all of those things, but it is balagan. And yet, some of our stuffed shirt corporate types suggest that we could be, should be, and should want to be the next Israel. So that sounds all very negative thus far. My idea is that or advice is that we don't try and replicate. My buddy Lee, who's in the audience, is both a petrol head and a runner. And he'll tell you that when you put a paper mache Ferrari on top of a granny car, it's kind of like putting me in Mo Farah's running shoes and asking me to run a 1 hour half marathon. It ain't going to happen. I'd love for it to happen, but it ain't going to happen. We just can't try and replicate. And so smarter people than me, which doesn't say much, but smart people around the place have been thinking about what are some models that outlier locations could use in order to compete. I'm going to go through these models, but a bit of a spoiler alert. They all kind of suck, I reckon, and I'll say why. So the first one is raw competition. So this is kind of like, damn the torpedoes. We are going to go out and we're going to crucify Silicon Valley or Israel. We're going to be bigger, we're going to be better, we're going to innovate faster. It worked really well for David when he had his slingshot and he was trying to take it to Goliath. I don't think that works at scale. And I would suggest that anyone that tries to build economic models based on raw competition is pretty ballsy, but is probably wrong. The second model is money, and that's awesome. If you've got a limitless supply of money, you just throw it at the problem. And clearly we've sort of seen that in the United Arab Emirates, where anyone that visited Dubai 20 years ago, it was just a desert and a camel path. Today you go there and that crazy road that's 10 lanes or whatever, and it's all green. Well, it's green on a little bit either side before it turns into desert, and they have just thrown ridiculous amounts of money at a problem and created something. Questionable how sustainable that is, but whatever. For us, we don't have that money. So I would suggest that, yeah, that's another model that doesn't really work. Another one is perfect timing. And so obviously Xero gets held up as kind of the exemplar in our ecosystem. And Xero is an example of perfect timing. So yeah, Rod would be the first to admit that they IPO'd literally months before the GFC. And he said himself that if they had left it a few months later, they would have been dead in the water. There is no way they would have got their IPO away. So their timing was perfect. An analogue might be, every few years we hear in the news that the global banana crop is really threatened because there's only one genetic strain of bananas. It would be like New Zealand scientists developing a new banana strain, and the day that was commercialised, finally the natural banana population died, and we were there with perfect timing. Problem is, you can't kind of work for that stuff. You can't build ecosystems or products or companies based on forward knowledge, because we don't have forward knowledge. And I guess the fourth one is luck. We could all head up to my way in Maipara and look for four-leaf clovers till the cows come home, no pun intended, and hope that we're lucky enough to get it right. And Xero's another example of this. I mean, Rod took a calculated guess, but the reality is that if you look at their three biggest competitors globally, Sage in the UK, MYOB down here, and Intuit in the US, those three companies essentially sat on their hands for the better part of a decade, and therefore gave Rod a chance to get to scale. And yeah, he took a calculated guess that they would do so, but he was bloody lucky that they did, and we all know how that story ends. So maybe there's a third way that isn't us recreating these other ecosystems and isn't us relying on these broken models. A way where we can be not the next Silicon Valley, and not even the next Israel for that matter, but the best Ōtautahi and the best Aotearoa that we can be. So what did these two examples that I've given you, what did they do to get to scale? What did they do? What did they take advantage of to get there? I'd suggest that they applied creative thinking to their specific context. So let's have a look at Silicon Valley. As we all know, Silicon Valley, one of its key differentiators is Stanford University. And that happened because a railroad magnate with the equivalent of today's gazillions of dollars decided to build a private university to memorialise his newly departed son. And he built Stanford University as this incredible centre of science and technology, research and education. California was also lucky that on the one hand it had an ocean, therefore lots of immigration from that direction, but also this was when Trump and his wall were not even a glimmer in his parents' eyes, but it had obviously South America and Mexico just south of it on the border, and it had a huge influx of population. We all know that in the mid-1800s, California had the gold rush that brought hundreds of thousands of people into the state looking for the promise of money and of fame and fortune. Put all of this stuff together, fast forward 100 years, and you've got lots of people, lots of smart people, and you've got a bunch of predominantly apricot orchards down in what will become Silicon Valley. And a couple of smart guys by the name of Hewlett and Packard decided to try something in their family garage. And they did, and they were really successful using their smarts, using the context that they were in. And that garage has been replaced by the things that we hear about, Google's Googleplex, Facebook's huge buildings at Menlo Park, obviously the new Apple campus, all of these things that have replaced apricot orchards, which is kind of a shame, because friends who used to live there before the new gold rush tell of going and hitting up the apricot orchards, and it was actually quite quaint, but progress at any cost, right? So Israel, what did it do? Well, the elephant in the room is that Israel was a creation because of global guilt about the Shoah, the Holocaust. The world felt bad, as obviously the world should have, and there were a lot of broken promises, and so off the back of that, the State of Israel was founded. It also had an amazing amount of immigration, But whereas in California that was looking for fame and fortune, it was much more prosaic in Israel. It was people fleeing millennia of persecution and pogroms in Europe and simply wanting a place where they could be accepted for what they were and who they were. And it has to be said, money played a huge part. Israel, since 1948 and even through to today, has gathered trillions and trillions of dollars of US aid. And where does that aid go? Well, a significant amount of it, a massive proportion of it, goes into the military. This here is a photo of Unit 8200. Anyone that hasn't heard of them, Unit 8200 is the Israel Defence Force, IDF, cybersecurity unit. And if you look at the successful cybersecurity companies over the past 10 or 20 years, a massive, massive proportion of them had their genesis, no pun intended, had their genesis in Unit 8200, and that's still the case. Hardly a week goes by without me hearing from another startup that was founded by Unit 8200 people. So what can we do here in New Zealand? What can we do to apply creative thinking to our context? What is our context, and what can we actually do better than anyone else? Not try and replicate, but do better. Well, I would suggest that we have the history and we have some, if not all, of the raw materials. After all, it was only a few kilometres from here that Ernest Rutherford, pottering away in his subterranean lab, was the first person on Earth to split the atom. Similarly, it was only a few miles from here where Angus Tate, also pottering around, created what was to go on and create Tate Communications Limited. Two fantastic examples of innovation here within our context and using our individual attributes, I would suggest. Key raw material, we have fantastic coffee here in New Zealand, and most importantly, we have beer, despite the fact that I don't drink it. We also grow grass really well, and it really troubles me. Obviously, this is election year, if anyone hadn't heard, and there is this incredible debate, rural versus urban. And it really troubles me that the rural sector denies that technology has any part to play in the future of our economy, and it's all about rural. But it also really troubles me that our sector seems to do similarly. We keep gloating in the fact that we're the third biggest or second biggest export earner, and we're going to crush farming. It shouldn't be about that. Why can't we be additive? Why can't we, as technologists, as a technology industry, be additive to what primary production does, so that we can take what we already do well, i.e. grow grass, but do it better? And I'm not talking about intensification. Our rivers are an abomination. We need to clean them up. We need to, I'm very much pro-water tax, and I am anti-dirty dairying, absolutely, but that doesn't mean we need to stop dairying. It means we need to apply the smart stuff that we do in this room to do it better. We just, I promised myself I wasn't going to mention powerhouse, but I can't resist. We just need to do it in a positive way, not in a powerhouse way. Sorry, Charlie. We have other attributes. The fact of the matter is that here in Christchurch, we can be working in our offices and we can go out for a ride or a run in the Port Hills. And I think we should really celebrate that fact. We should celebrate the fact that people like Alex Proctor can run really successful businesses but decide to work 20 or 30 hours a week and achieve a sense of balance, because that sounds like a small thing, but that is fundamentally impossible in either of the two ecosystems that we are suggesting we should emulate. It simply cannot be done in Silicon Valley or in Israel, and that is really precious. But beyond recreation, there's a huge asset there. Tourism, adventure tourism, sports science, all of these things are a potential area where we can innovate. And clearly, we have things like Snowpark, where companies are doing winter testing of vehicles. We have our ski industry. We have these amazing mountains. We can leverage that by applying smart technology to them. We really need to celebrate what we have and what makes us special. You go to the US and you have Black Lives Matter and police brutality and people calling for every police officer to have a camera on their chest so there's photographic evidence when they shoot an innocent person. What do we have? Always blow on the pie. You go to the US and you've got the Kardashian clan and all that it stands for and what popular media does to the IQ of the citizenry. What do we have? Nick Minute. I don't know what I'd say about his IQ, but sure it's shonky and sure it's hokey and sure we laugh at ourselves about it, but this is great. It's awesome that our police officers can tell people to blow on the pie. And we can have a dude like Nick Minute get a little bit of attention for a few months or a few years. It's great, that's special, and we should celebrate it. There's a lot of criticism for the number 8 mentality, like it's not cool because it's not scalable and it's not the way Silicon Valley works. But there ain't nothing wrong with being innovative, with applying Kiwi ingenuity to what we do. We should celebrate that. We should encourage not dismiss it because it's not the way someone who we think is bigger and better than us does it. So let's stop trying to be someone else. We're not friggin' Silicon Valley, we're not Israel, and we shouldn't want to be. Let's focus on being a better version of us. Sure. Thanks, everyone.